Hello and welcome to this very special interview on France24. We're in Strasbourg at the Council of Europe, and our very special guest is the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. Mr. Secretary General, welcome to the show.
It's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
We're in Europe where there's a lot of talk about a so-called migrant crisis. We've seen instances of migrants crossing the Mediterranean or crossing countries, arriving to Europe. A lot of tension, a lot of controversies. The Pope condemning European countries for shutting their doors to those migrants. Hungary, a member of the European Union, saying it would erect a wall. Are you concerned about what you see and what you hear on the continent about migrants?
We are very much concerned about the increasing number of immigrants and refugees to a European continent. And this has become a global issue, not only on European continent, but also in Southeast Asia, particularly in Andaman Sea. But most number of refugees are coming to European continent for their better future. The priority of the United Nations is that all the measures should be rights-based. Their human rights and human dignity and their human lives should be saved. That is number one priority. And we welcome the comprehensive measures European leaders are now taking. I sincerely hope that this will really help reduce the burdens of some particular countries, and this should be a collective responsibility.
But there is still some talk that for a more military option by the European Union to basically go into Libyan territorial waters to stop the boats, including militarily. You had expressed concerns about such a military option. Do you think it has been discarded for good now, or are you still concerned that there might be a military aspect to this operation?
There are relevant international law and governing this kind of military operation. First of all, there should be agreement from the sovereign country Libya, and that should also be discussed at the Security Council. I understand that there are concerns raised among the Security Council members. It is important that the current negotiation going on under the facilitation of my special envoy, Mr. Leon, should have a good agreement to establish a government of national accord. If such an agreement is done, then I expect that the government of national accord of Libya could agree to this kind of operation. But at this time, everything should be governed by international law.
Okay, and this would not be in accordance with international law, if I understand correctly. Let's go to Libya, because obviously, as you mentioned, a Spanish diplomat, an envoy of yours, Bernardino Leon, has been trying to mediate. Let's speak bluntly, it hasn't worked. Are you concerned that Libya is really on the verge of collapse, and there is clearly already a civil war going on?
My special envoy, Mr. Leon, and myself are still working very hard with optimistic view that this government of national accord could be established. I and he have been reaching out to the representatives of the parties, and we also been getting support from neighboring countries. It's absolutely necessary at this time to reach an agreement so that the Libyan people can really enjoy political stability, and they should be able to engage in their own economic and social development.
Mr. Secretary General, but it's not working. I mean, there's no deal on the horizon.
We are working hard to reach an agreement, to help reach an agreement. It's, after all, the parties of Libya who have to agree. We are now providing all possible facilitating role.
When do you expect there could be an agreement?
That I cannot guarantee, but we have already presented the fourth amendment, the fourth draft. So this has been consulted between the parties with the help of neighboring countries. Therefore, there should be an agreement as soon as possible. Yeah.
Let's turn to another flashpoint, Yemen, where the UN has also recently held negotiations in Geneva. There again, no agreement. You've called for a humanitarian truce, a ceasefire, but it's not working.
I opened the meeting between the parties in Geneva on 15th of June, a week ago. Unfortunately, because of the late arrival of a representative of Houthis, I was not able to have a joint meeting. Of course, the facilitating effort of my special envoy, Mr. Ismail Ould Sheikh Ahmed, has not yielded any result at this time. My proposal at that time was to have at least a 2-week-long humanitarian pause on which we can build up political space. At the same time, there is a dire humanitarian situation. We've been mobilizing all possible humanitarian assistance to millions of Yemeni people.
But the war is still raging. I mean, the truce calls have not been listened to by both parties, I'm assuming.
I have been consistently stating that there is no military solution to this. There is only one solution. That's a solution through dialogue in a peaceful way. I'm asking and urging again to the parties to immediately cease their violence and return to a dialogue table. That's what the United Nations will continue to do that. My special envoy is still optimistic that there is a possibility that humanitarian pause will be there and withdrawal.
When?
That we are working very hard. We are working very hard. Yeah.
Okay, maybe one bright spot in the rather sad horizon in the Middle East is the negotiations for a nuclear deal between Western countries and Iran. We're 1 week away from the deadline. From what you're hearing, are you optimistic that there will be a deal?
While coming to this place, I was able to meet briefly with the Foreign Minister Zarif. We were flying in the same airplane, so I took that opportunity. We've been working very closely with him on this issue. This is a vitally important issue to have an agreement by June 30th. And I strongly encouraged the Minister Zarif, and also I strongly encouraged the European leaders, High Representative Madame Mogherini, to exert their all possible efforts. I'm asking all permanent 5+1 representatives to do their best to have an agreement. There needs to be a complete deal, but with a sense of spirit of flexibility and compromise, so that we can be able to have a full resolution of this issue.
From your impromptu conversation with Mr. Zarif, did you sense that this was indeed within reach, that a deal was clearly on the table and very close?
He was very much determined to see the end of this resolution, negotiation. Of course, he cautioned the possibility of very difficult remaining few more days, a very difficult process of negotiation.
But you feel it's going to happen?
Yes, I hope so, yes.
I want to get to some recent criticism that you and the UN have received from Israel about some reports on the last Gaza war. Prime Minister Netanyahu said there were no limits to UN hypocrisy, saying it was a dark day for the UN. What's your response to his criticism?
I made it quite clear in my report on this children and armed conflict that we have seen a number of children dead and injured in the course of Gaza war. I have strongly condemned this one, so that all this kind of violence should never be never be repeated.
Okay. I want to very quickly to get to the issue of climate change. There's obviously a major summit at the end of the year in Paris. Negotiations are being shepherded by the UN. The Pope came out with an encyclical in which he said, well, there was an emergency to act. He also talked about the failure of global summits on the environment. Do you think this time there will be success at
I'm
Paris?
reasonably optimistic that this time the international community will be able to have universal and ambitious and meaningful climate change agreement applicable to all the countries. We have been discussing this matter longer than 20 years. This year is the 21st year since UN Framework Convention on Climate Change negotiation began. Therefore, I count on all member states of the United Nations to be future-oriented, more flexible, and more committed to have this agreement. And I really count on the leadership of President Hollande of France, as well as Minister Fabius, who will be working as the president of this negotiation.
What if it fails?
We are not working for failure. We're working for success. We should not repeat what we have been doing during the last 20 years.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much for answering to all our questions. And thank you very much for watching this special interview here on France 24 from the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Thank you.